On her wedding day, her dog suddenly blocked her path, refusing to move. Confused, she tried to coax him aside, only to uncover a heartbreaking truth behind his unusual behavior. Emma Bennett stood before the mirror in her childhood bedroom, barely recognizing the woman reflected back at her. The ivory gown she had imagined herself wearing since she was a little girl fit like a dream, its delicate lace catching the sunlight streaming through the window. Her auburn hair, styled in soft waves, peeked out from beneath her veil. Everything seemed to be falling perfectly into place, almost everything. At her feet, Buddy, her faithful German shepherd, lay with his chin resting on his paws. His amber eyes followed her movements with an intensity that felt different today, almost as if he were trying to tell her something. For 13 years, Buddy had been her rock, her constant companion through high school, college, and, now, adulthood. Emma had rescued him as a scrappy 8-month-old puppy from a shelter in their small Connecticut town. Over the years, he'd saved her just as much in ways words couldn't capture. "What do you think, Buddy?" she asked softly, turning slightly to admire the dress's intricate lace in the mirror. "Is Ethan a keeper?" At the sound of her fiancé's name, Buddy's ears twitched, but he didn't spring up like he usually did. For the past 3 years, Buddy had adored Ethan, bounding to greet him at every mention. But today, he remained uncharacteristically still. "Sweetheart, the makeup artist is here. Are you ready?" Emma's mother, Margaret, called from the doorway. "Come in, Mom," Emma replied. She cast one last glance at the mirror, then leaned down to scratch behind Buddy's ears. "Come on, boy. Let's go make me a bride." Buddy rose slowly, his aging joints creaking audibly. The sight tugged at Emma's heart. He wasn't the vibrant dog he'd once been, but he was still her best friend. She'd insisted he be part of the wedding, even over her mother's protests. Ethan, understanding the bond they shared, had fully supported the idea. They'd even picked out a dapper collar with a tiny bow tie for him to wear. The morning rushed by in a blur, the house filled with bridesmaids in elegant sky blue dresses, stylists wielding curling irons and makeup brushes, and Margaret's rapid footsteps as she coordinated with the wedding planner. Amidst the chaos, Buddy stayed close to Emma, quieter than usual. "Is Buddy okay?" Chloe, Emma's maid of honor and best friend since middle school, asked as they prepared to leave for the church. "He's been off today," Emma admitted, running a hand along his back. "I think he's just picking up on all the excitement. You know how sensitive he is." But, deep down, unease gnawed at her. For days, Buddy had seemed more tired, eating less and sleeping more. She'd meant to call the vet, but had been swept up in last-minute wedding plans. "We need to head out," Margaret announced, glancing at her watch. "The photographer wants to get some shots before the ceremony, and traffic might be bad." "All right," Emma said, gathering her skirts. "Come on, Buddy. Time to go." The drive to St. Patrick's Church, a charming, historic site nestled in the heart of town, was brief, but Emma's stomach twisted in knots. The source of her nerves wasn't the ceremony or her vows. She had no doubts about Ethan. It was Buddy. He rested his head in her lap during the ride, something he rarely did, his quiet presence both comforting and worrisome. When they arrived, the church garden was bathed in the golden light of late September. Leaves in hues of amber and crimson fluttered in a gentle breeze, creating a picturesque scene. "Let's start with some solo shots of the bride," the photographer suggested, positioning Emma near a stately oak tree. "We'll bring in the wedding party after." Buddy, who had been sitting obediently beside Emma's father, suddenly stood and padded over to her. Before anyone could react, he positioned himself firmly in front of her, blocking the photographer's view. "Buddy, move, Buddy," Emma coaxed, gently, reaching down to guide him aside. But he wouldn't budge. His body leaned protectively against her legs, his soulful amber eyes fixed on hers. "Buddy, come here," her father called, patting his leg. But the dog didn't move. "Maybe he needs a walk," Chloe suggested, reaching for his leash. But as Emma looked down at Buddy, her heart tightened. Something told her this wasn't about a walk. As Chloe approached, Buddy instinctively pressed closer to Emma, his sudden movement nearly throwing her off balance. "Buddy, what's going on?" Emma asked softly, dropping to her knees, wedding dress pooling around her, to meet his eyes. That's when she noticed it. His breaths came unevenly, his sides rising and falling with a faint, unfamiliar tremor. His legs quivered ever so slightly, something she hadn't seen before. "Emma, we need to get these photos done." Her mother's voice rang out, edged with impatience. "The guests will be here any minute." But Emma barely registered her words. Buddy leaned heavily against her, his head resting on her shoulder, the way he always did when he was unwell or seeking comfort. His body radiated heat, far too warm against her skin. "Something's not right," Emma murmured, her voice breaking as she ran her hand over Buddy's back. "He's not okay." Chloe crouched beside her, placing a steadying hand on Buddy's side. "His heart. It's racing," she said, her voice tinged with worry. Emma's father, who had been hovering nearby, stepped closer, concern etched deeply into his features. "Should we call the vet?" he asked, his gaze flickering between Buddy and his daughter. "But the wedding—" Margaret began, her voice faltering as she caught the look in Emma's eyes. Without another word, Emma was already pulling out her phone, dialing Dr. Logan's number with trembling fingers. "Dr. Logan's emergency line, this is Lily," came the calm voice on the other end. "Lily, it's Emma Bennett. Something's wrong with Buddy. He's struggling to breathe. His heart is racing and he's acting strange. I don't know what's happening, but I need help." Her voice wavered, thick with urgency. "Emma, aren't you getting married today?" Lily asked hesitantly. "Yes, but—" Emma's voice cracked. "Please, I need him seen now." "Bring him in, right away," Lily said firmly. "Dr. Logan is here. He'll see Buddy as soon as you arrive." Emma ended the call and looked up at the small crowd that had gathered. Her parents, Chloe, the photographer, the wedding planner murmuring anxiously into her headset. Her eyes met her father's, and without hesitation, he gave her a firm nod. "Go," he said simply. "I'll call Ethan and explain. Chloe can drive you." Then, using the tone that had guided her through childhood, he added, "Emma Bennett, that dog has been there through everything. Your first heartbreak, your college finals, even when we lost your grandmother. He's been by your side every step of the way, including when you met Ethan. You don't abandon family when they need you." Tears brimmed in Emma's eyes as she hugged her father tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. The moments that followed were a blur of hurried actions. Chloe helped Emma gather her voluminous skirts and led her to the car while Buddy stayed close, pressing against Emma's legs whenever he could. After a brief pause, Emma's mother took charge, assuring everyone she'd handle the guests while the wedding planner coordinated updates to the reception. During the tense drive to the clinic, Emma sat in the back seat with Buddy's head cradled in her lap. Her wedding gown billowed around them like a snowdrift, her hand resting on Buddy's chest to monitor his breathing while the other stroked his grey-streaked muzzle. "Remember when you first got him?" Chloe said, her tone light but her intent clear. She was trying to distract Emma. A faint smile touched Emma's lips despite the worry gnawing at her. He destroyed my favorite pair of shoes that first week. And my mum's garden gloves. Oh, and that awful Christmas hat my aunt gave me. The one with the fake fruit on it? Chloe asked with a smirk. He did you a favor there. They reached the clinic in record time. Dr. Logan was waiting by the door, his expression briefly betraying surprise at Emma's wedding attire. But he said nothing, focusing instead on helping Buddy inside. The examination room felt suffocating as Emma paced back and forth, her dress rustling with each step. Chloe sat silently, occasionally glancing at her phone to update the others. Time dragged painfully until Dr. Logan returned, his expression serious. "Emma," he began gently, "please sit down." Those words, every pet owner's nightmare, made her knees buckle. Chloe was immediately at her side, easing her into a chair. "Buddy has developed a cardiac condition," Dr. Logan said, his voice calm but heavy. "From the tests we just ran, it appears he's in the early stages of heart failure. The excitement and stress of today likely worsened his symptoms." Emma stared at him, her breath catching in her throat. "But he was fine just a few days ago," she whispered. "These conditions can progress quickly, especially in senior dogs. Given that he's 13, he's already lived beyond the typical lifespan for his breed. He's been trying to tell you something was wrong the only way he knew how," Emma whispered, the realization dawning. "By not leaving my side, by blocking me from walking away." Dr. Logan nodded. Dogs are remarkably intuitive. He knew he needed help, and you're the one he trusts most in the world. "What can we do?" Emma's voice wavered. "We can begin medication immediately. It won't cure the condition, but it will help manage the symptoms and make him more comfortable." He paused, carefully choosing his next words. "But Emma, considering his age and the severity of the condition, we're likely looking at months, not years." The tears Emma had been holding back began to spill. Chloe, her maid of honor, gripped her hand tightly. "I need to stay with him," Emma said resolutely. "Emma," Chloe started gently. "No, you don't understand." Emma's voice grew firm. "When I adopted Buddy, I made him a promise. I promised he'd never be alone when he needed me most." She glanced down at her wedding dress, then back at Dr. Logan. "Can you start the treatment now?" The next hour blurred into a whirlwind. Dr. Logan administered the first dose of medication, explaining the treatment plan, while Emma knelt on the floor beside Buddy's bed. Her wedding dress billowed around her like a soft shield as she took detailed notes on her phone, her focus unwavering. Outside, life carried on. Chloe coordinated with Emma's parents and Ethan's family. Guests waiting at the church were informed of an emergency, and the reception was postponed. Emma's phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. "How is he?" Her fingers trembled as she typed, "Not good. Heart failure. I'm so sorry about the wedding." The reply came almost instantly. Then, "Don't apologize, I'm on my way." 20 minutes later, the clinic door swung open. Ethan strode in, still in his tuxedo, with his best man Ryan at his side. Emma looked up from the floor, her makeup smudged with tears, hair escaping its careful styling, and her dress hopelessly crumpled. "I'm so sorry," she began. Ethan crossed the room in 2 quick steps and knelt beside her. "Hey," he said softly, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Remember what I told you when I proposed? I wanted to marry you because you have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met. You love without holding back. How could I be mad at you for proving that?" Emma leaned into him, fresh tears spilling. "But the wedding," she started. Ethan shook his head firmly. "The wedding can wait. The guests, the venue, all the details. None of it matters. What matters is us, together. He reached out to scratch Buddy behind the ears, the old dog's tail wagging weakly in response. Ryan cleared his throat. "Actually, we might have an idea about that," he said, glancing at Chloe, who nodded eagerly. "We've been making calls. The minister said he'd be happy to come here. Your parents are on board. It won't be the wedding you planned, but you could get married here." Emma looked around the small exam room and then down at Buddy, who gazed up at her with those familiar, loving eyes. "Really?" "Only if you want to," Ethan said. "We can wait, reschedule everything." Emma shook her head, a watery smile spreading across her face. "This is perfect. Buddy has been with us for every important moment. When we met, our first date when you proposed. He should be here for this too." 2 hours later, Emma Bennett married Ethan Carter in the waiting room of Riverside Veterinary Clinic. Her gown was wrinkled, her makeup hastily patched up by Chloe, and her hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders. Ethan's tuxedo was slightly creased, evidence of hours spent sitting on the floor. The only guests were their parents, the minister, Ryan, and Chloe. And Buddy, dressed in his bow-tie collar and with a fresh port in his leg, rested contentedly at their feet as they exchanged vows. Dr. Logan and his staff watched from the doorway, discreetly dabbing at their eyes as the minister pronounced them husband and wife. When Ethan kissed Emma, Buddy lifted his head just enough to let out a soft, approving woof, making everyone laugh through their tears. That evening, instead of celebrating with a grand reception, Emma and Ethan found themselves sitting on the floor of their cozy apartment, still dressed in their wedding attire. Between them sat Buddy, their loyal German shepherd, who happily accepted small bites of plain chicken from their Chinese takeout dinner. Dr. Logan had approved the treat, and they took turns feeding him with care. "You know," Ethan said, watching as Buddy delicately took another bite from Emma's hand, "when I met you two at the park that day, I knew Buddy was part of the deal. What I didn't realize was how much he'd teach me about love." Emma tilted her head, intrigued by the statement. "What do you mean?" she asked. Ethan smiled, glancing at Buddy. "Today, for example. You had everything planned for a perfect wedding, the flowers, the music, the ceremony, all exactly how you dreamed it. But the moment Buddy needed you, none of it mattered. You didn't even pause to think. That's real love. The kind that doesn't keep score, that shows up no matter what. That's the kind of love I want to build our marriage on." Emma leaned over and kissed him softly, careful not to disturb Buddy, who had curled up between them and fallen asleep. "When did you get so wise?" she teased. Ethan grinned, nodding toward Buddy. "I've been learning from the best. He's been showing us how to love without conditions all along." The months that followed were a bittersweet mix of joy and sorrow. Buddy had good days when he seemed almost like his younger self, enjoying short walks in the park or basking in the sun. But there were also difficult days when his illness slowed him down. Emma and Ethan adapted, rearranging their schedules to ensure someone was always home with him when he needed extra care. On good days, they celebrated with quiet strolls in the park where their love story began. On bad days, they comforted him as best they could, cherishing every moment of his gentle presence. Even as his health declined, Buddy never lost his loving spirit. He still greeted them at the door, wagging his tail even when he was too tired to stand. He still curled up by their bed every night, begged for treats with those soulful eyes, and offered his unwavering love in countless small ways. One quiet evening in early spring, about 6 months after their wedding, Buddy let them know it was time. The day had been peaceful. He'd enjoyed his breakfast, soaked up the afternoon sun in their backyard, and even played briefly with his favorite toy. But as the evening deepened, Buddy grew restless. He moved between Emma and Ethan as though ensuring they were both by his side. They called Dr. Logan, who came to their home. In the warm glow of their living room, with Buddy's head resting in Emma's lap and Ethan gently stroking his back, they said their final goodbye. "Thank you," Emma whispered, her voice breaking as tears fell. "Thank you for everything. For being my protector, my friend, for leading me to Ethan, and for teaching us what love truly means. And thank you for choosing me all those years ago at the shelter." That night, after the house had fallen into an aching stillness, Emma and Ethan sat together, flipping through photos from their wedding day. Emma lingered on one picture Chloe had taken without their notice. In it, the two of them were exchanging vows, but their attention wasn't on each other or the minister. It was on Buddy, who was gazing up at them with adoration. "He knew," Emma murmured, tracing Buddy's face in the photo. "That day at the church, when he wouldn't let me walk down the aisle, he knew his time was running out. He wanted to make sure we understood what mattered most." Ethan wrapped his arms around her. "He succeeded," he said softly. "Our wedding might not have been perfect by anyone else's standards, but it was perfect for us. Because of Buddy, we started this journey focused on love, commitment, and always being there for each other." A year later, Emma and Ethan stood outside the Riverside Animal Shelter, the same shelter where Emma had found Buddy 13 years before. They had spent months grieving his loss, but now they felt ready to open their hearts again. "Are you sure about this?" Ethan asked, gently squeezing Emma's hand. Emma nodded, her fingers brushing the locket around her neck that held a small photo of Buddy. "He taught us so much about love. The best way to honor his memory is to share that love with another dog who needs a home." Inside, the shelter smelled of hope and second chances. As they walked past the kennels, Emma couldn't help but think of the first time she'd seen Buddy, a skinny, frightened puppy who'd captured her heart with our one look. At the last kennel, they stopped. A senior golden retriever lay on a threadbare blanket, his grey-muzzled face resting on his paws. His kind brown eyes met theirs with a quiet, gentle trust. Emma smiled, her heart full. "I think we found him," she whispered. And as they knelt down to meet the dog who would become their next chapter, it felt like Buddy was with them, guiding them toward a new beginning, just as he always had. The name tag read, Ray, 10 years old. "Most people come looking for puppies or young dogs," the shelter worker said, noticing their curiosity. "Ray's been with us for 3 months now. His family had to give him up when they moved into a care facility. He's the sweetest dog you'll meet, but his age tends to scare people off." Emma crouched by the kennel door. Ray lifted his head slowly, then stood up with some effort and walked toward her. Through the bars, he pressed his nose against her hand. "He has arthritis in his back legs," the worker continued. "He'll need medication and probably won't enjoy long walks." "But he's perfect," Emma interrupted, her voice catching as she looked up at Ethan with tears brimming in her eyes. Ethan gave her a quiet nod, understanding completely. That evening, Ray joined their family as if he'd always belonged there. He bypassed the plush new bed they had bought him and claimed Buddy's old one by the fireplace instead. It was as if he could sense it had been a special place and felt honored to carry on its legacy. Later, as Emma and Ethan curled up together on the couch, they watched Ray sleeping soundly in Buddy's old spot. "You know," Emma murmured, Some people think we're crazy for adopting a senior dog. They say it's not worth it since we'll have less time with him. Ethan pulled her closer with a soft smile. But they don't understand, do they? Buddy showed us that what matters isn't how long we have. It's the love we share while we have it. Emma nodded, her head resting against his shoulder as they watched Ray twitch in his dreams. Buddy's greatest gift wasn't just what he taught us on our wedding day. It was showing us that love is worth every sacrifice, every goodbye. That's why we can love Ray now, even knowing how short our time might be. Ethan glanced toward Ray, who had just woken up and was gazing at them with a look of pure contentment. "And look at him," Ethan said softly. "He's helping us honor Buddy's memory by keeping the cycle of love alive." That night, as they prepared for bed, Ray followed them upstairs, settling into the spot where Buddy used to sleep, right beside Emma's side of the bed. As Emma drifted off, she could almost feel two dogs watching over her, one whose warm breath she could feel, and one whose memory was forever imprinted on her heart. Years later, Emma and Ethan would share the story with their children, not as a tale of plans gone awry, but as a lesson in love, loyalty, and life's most meaningful priorities. They'd show them the photos from their wedding day, pointing out the old German shepherd in the bow tie collar who had changed everything, explaining how life's most precious moments often come disguised as life's greatest surprises. In their home, next to their wedding photo, they displayed a simple wooden plaque that read, "Sometimes love means letting go of perfect plans, because true perfection lies in the hearts that guide us home." Below, it hung two collars, Buddy's with its tiny bow tie, and Ray's, symbols of a love that had grown through loss, learning, and change. Every anniversary, instead of hosting grand celebrations or indulging in fancy dinners, Emma and Ethan would visit the local animal shelter. They brought donations, sat with the senior dogs, and shared Ray's story with anyone who'd listen. They hoped that someone else might see past the grey muzzles to the love still waiting to be shared. Because that was Buddy's lasting legacy, teaching them that love, in all its forms, was worth the risk, the heartache, and the sacrifice, and that even the most fleeting of moments, when shared with love, can become timeless. Wow, what a story, right? While this story is purely fictional, it truly captures something so real, the incredible, selfless bond we share with our pets. Buddy may not exist outside of this narrative, but his character embodies the devotion, loyalty, and unconditional love that so many of our furry companions give us every single day. What really touched me was how Emma and Ethan's love for Buddy showed that true love isn't about convenience or perfection. It's about showing up no matter what. They sacrificed what could have been the perfect wedding to be there for him when he needed them the most. That's the kind of love and loyalty we all hope to have, not just from our pets, but in all the relationships that matter to us. The story also teaches us that life isn't about sticking to a perfect plan. It's about adapting, finding meaning in the unexpected, and cherishing what truly matters. Through Buddy, Emma and Ethan learned that love is worth the heartbreak that comes with it. And that's a message I think we can all carry with us. If this story moved you as much as it moved me, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a pet who changed your life or taught you something about love? Drop your story in the comments. I'd be thrilled to read them. And let's not forget the amazing takeaway here. Senior pets deserve love too. They might not have as much time left, but the love they give in return is boundless. If you're considering adopting, maybe think about giving a senior pet a second chance. Trust me, it's a kind of love you'll never regret. Thanks for sticking with me through this beautiful story. Let's keep spreading kindness, love, and maybe even a little more space for those grey-muzzled angels out there.